Well, hello again. This is Tinny. I'm Tinny McCarty. I am one of the owners. My daughter and I own Shades of Hope. I'm the founder. We've been here almost 33 years. I've been in the addiction field almost 40 years. And today I am semi-retired. I have a private practice, a small private practice, and I do an intensive on codependency once a month. And today, that's what I'm going to be talking with you about. I have mentioned codependency in other videos, but codependency is such a broad subject to talk about that it takes a while to get it all covered, and I'm not going to get it all covered today. But what I want to talk about and focus on is how we can be codependent with our children. And codependency, very short definition of codependency is getting our good feelings about ourselves outside ourselves and our bad feelings about ourselves outside ourselves. And codependency can be generational. It is learned behavior. It's passed down from generation to generation. And the good news is it can stop in one generation with help. But I do believe that codependency is a brain chemistry disease, much like alcoholism, eating disorders, drug addiction. It is about the brain chemistry, and just gets in a rut, and it goes those messages, and it gets dug deeper and deeper and deeper into our brains, and that becomes our behavior. And it, like I said, it's passed on from generation to generation. And we may make decisions when we come out of dysfunctional homes and I did. I made a definite decision when I left home that I wasn't going to be like my mom and dad. My mother was an alcoholic and prescription drug addict and laid on the couch and drank and took pills, and she was sick 95% of the time. And I became her caregiver at a very early age, about 8, 9, 10 years of age. And you know, the thing about children who are raised in the disease of alcoholism, we do a lot of things that's not age appropriate. And, you know, people really don't have to feel sorry for adult children or children of alcoholics. I do wish someone had intervened and, you know, and really known what was happening, so I could have had the opportunity to have a childhood. Because children who are raised in real severe dysfunction usually do not have a childhood. So I became a caretaker very early, a caregiver, and I swore that I'd never be like my parents. My father was a very violent man. He was a rager. He was a violent, very violent man. What I did, and my mother felt so sorry for herself, and she felt sorry for me. Self-pity was her main thing. So I grew up feeling sorry for myself and having my father's rage. Those are things that we can carry from our parents into our adulthood, and those are two of the things that I carried from mine. But I did make a decision my life was going to be different, and it looked much different than my parents. So, but it produced in a lot of ways the same results when I had a family of my own. So to just say that, you know, I went to the opposite. Instead of children not getting much attention, like I didn't get much attention, it was my job, a full-time job, being a wife and a homemaker, and particularly my mothering. I mothered my kids almost to death. I over-mothered sometimes, but I so wanted them to have a different life than I had. And they did. They had many privileges. They had a lot of things, but it's still, I got my good feelings about myself from my children, the way they looked, the way people admired them, and then admired me for, oh, look how beautiful those children are. You know, we'd go to church and fill up a pew, because we had 7 children. I had 3 bonus children that were teenagers and 4 little children. So we'd fill up a whole pew, and it would take me all week to get ready for Sunday morning, because everybody had to look perfect, and I'd get those clothes ready and those bows on those girls, and people would look at me and say, how do you do it? Oh, you're the best mother. And that was my payoff. That was my payoff. And then we'd get, On the way to church, I'd sit those kids in that station wagon, and those before seat belts, and I would threaten them with an inch of their life if they got dirty or got those bows out, and I'd be, hollering and screaming and pinching and all that, and then we'd get to church, and I'd just smile, and they'd go in, and it was a double standard for the kids, but we would have, a wonderful time at church, and everybody would compliment me and the children, and my husband would usually sleep through church because he was a practicing alcoholic, but by God, I made him go to church because we had to look good on the outside. On the way home, I would be fussing and, got inside that house, and it's like my mouth would turn on. I was a rager. I raised my children like a staff sergeant. You could eat off the floors of our house. It was so clean. I don't know why anybody would want to, but I was a clean freak, and that's a hard environment to raise kids in. And my children today, when they talk about their childhood, what they talk about is the good stuff. They are all in their 50s. They have all done their own codependency work and what other work that they need to do. And so there was a lot of good things in our household. I do want to say that. Everything about codependency and about, children raised in dysfunctional homes, not everything is bad. We, emphasize what is not very healthy when we talk about codependency. But my children point out to me every day the good things that, that they had to do, the opportunities that they had. And, I made their childhood fun along with a lot of expectations from them. And my hand was plated on their back. I wanted them to succeed in everything that they did. And they happened to go to a small school, and they had the ability to participate in many activities, and they did because their mother wanted them to. And it made me look good. And it made them look good, and they got scholarships and to colleges. But nevertheless, I want to talk about codependency and what types of homes that it's set up in. I've already mentioned when children are raised in alcoholic homes. Absolutely. When they are raised in dysfunction, they grow up and don't know what normal is, and we go from one extreme to the other. But also children that are raised in where there is a parent mentally ill, or where there is a chronically physically ill parent. It's where the energy goes, where the bulk of the energy goes to a parent or some outside entity, like a work addiction, like a work addicted father or mother that, for most of the time is work addict fathers. They love and adore their family, and they want to give them everything that they know to give them financially, and so they will leave the house early in the morning, sometimes 6 or 6:30, particularly in large cities where they have to commute to work. 6 or 6:30, they'll go in and kiss the child goodbye, be gone all day long, all day into the evening, be home maybe 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. This is what work addiction is. And they'll go in and kiss the child goodnight because the kids are already in bed. And so what that can create, it doesn't in all children because every child is different, but it can create in some children that feeling of abandonment. Well, where's dad? Because they go all day and night without seeing. Now they have material things. As they get older, they have cars to drive, pretty clothes, and vacations and all that, even on vacations. A work addict will work all the time, even on vacation. So work addiction, alcoholism, physical illness, where there's a chronically ill parent that is in the bed and people have to tiptoe around to not disturb the physically ill person, particularly if this is going on in the first 7 years of a child's life. There's a big imprint put on that brain. And then what have I left out? Mental illness. And also when children are raised, and this is not all the time, but it does happen, when they're raised by military career people, when those career people have spent their years in the military, have done everything a certain way and it's perfection. Well, a lot of times they'll bring that mentality into the home, and children will either have to toe the mark and be like little soldiers, or they'll rebel and go the other way. And so I think, and another one is ministers' children, people who are born into homes where the father is pastors or the mother ministers. Because what usually happens, and I was talking to a friend a while ago, and it seems as if it's maybe not be quite as bad as generations past, but used to, a pastor was available, all the time, 24/7 for their congregation. For instance, and I remember this in having pastors of my own after I got to be an adult, like maybe the family would be packed, ready to go on vacation. And they would get a call, the minister would, that someone had died in their congregation. And immediately the vacation was postponed or put off altogether because he had a funeral. And then the wife would be such a part of it. Maybe she's saying, or had to provide the food, whatever. The focus was on the congregation. Now that all looked good from the outside, but what would happen to the children? It produces that in some children, that feeling of being different. It's that feeling of I don't matter. A lot of your minister's children will grow up feeling I don't matter. He cares more about the congregation than he does me. Also, this is where in this type of where children are brought up, where there's a lot of people around and where they're exposed to a lot of different people. This is why there's such a pretty high rate of sexual abuse in churches. Look at the Catholic Church, and they're taught to keep it a secret, a big secret. And we work with people from every denomination where there's been sexual abuse. And we have worked with people where the minister has gone outside the marriage and had affairs in the church. This happens. It is not out of the norm, because he's working very close with his congregation. Maybe his secretary spends more time with the secretary than he does his wife. And they get to talking about maybe their bad marriages or blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon there's an affair going. People are human beings, regardless of or no matter what their occupation is. And so these are types of families where codependency can rear its ugly head, and how it can be a seedbed for codependency for children as they grow up. They can become caretakers. They kind of go one direction or another. They either overgive or undergive. You either have that wall of not so much depression, but that wall of I don't care. And I'm not going to be taking care of anyone. That avoidance personality. Or the other way, where it's an overcaring. So I'm talking more today about the overcaring and the overgiver. I do want to say that love is the answer, and I have not met a parent yet, and I've met some very dysfunctional parents, including my own. But I do want to say I've never met a parent. I don't believe parents get up some morning and say, today's the day I go screw up my kids' lives. By and large, parents, even dysfunctional parents, want the best for their children. They just don't know what the best is. They don't know how to parent in a healthy way, particularly if they weren't parented in a healthy way. So, for instance, me, I had no way, I didn't have any idea how to parent my children. I read every book that came, Dr. Spock was the one then, I read everything. And even as a child or a young teenager, going to school, I would hear my friends say, oh, I can't do so-and-so this weekend because I'm grounded. To me, that was a sign of a caring parent and love. And so, bless my heart, I started grounding myself. I'd tell my peers, well, I can't do that because I'm grounded. Well, basically why I couldn't do anything because I had to stay home with mother. So anyway, it's children want in their birthright, a child's birthright. They do not ask to be brought into this world. They are God's gift. And what their birthright is appropriate time, attention, and directions. Children need appropriate directions. They need time spent with them, and they need unconditional positive regard. They need love above all, a healthy love. Okay, so I'm going to give you some ideas about uh, what it looks like to have some traits of codependency uh, with children. And one of the things is how I spoke is when a parent gets their good or bad feelings about themselves through their children. For instance, they make all straight A's. Great. And the mother, or the, not just the mother, the parents will take ownership of that and they'll brag to people. And, I've had some very smart children, and oh, they made me feel good and look good. Their names would come out in the paper, mother and father of so-and-so, and, valedictory, this, that, something, and that makes a parent feel good. I thrived on that. That's why I did everything that I wanted, that I could do to make my children successful. And I went overboard, I will admit, and it was so important to me for them to be successful. So that's how I got my good feelings about myself. Then if they didn't do real well, if they acted up, if they had the nerve to be a kid and get in some kind of trouble or just do what kids do, I would be embarrassed. I would take on the pain and the anger, and as if it was a reflection on me. As you can hear, codependency is a very self-centered disease, and it is being addicted to people, places, and things, all about ourselves. But it looks, like we're such caregivers. But for codependence, when we give, it's not for free and for fun. If you can give and love people for free and for fun and not expect anything back, you're probably not codependent. But when you have strings attached to your love, you might want to look at being codependent, because that's what codependency is. I'm going to love you so you will love me back. I want to compliment you, and hopefully you will compliment me back. Another thing is codependency is if you're standing, with a group of people and there's somebody beside you that really is looking good, and somebody comes up and compliments that person about their dress or something, you take it on that, well, why didn't they compliment me? You won't say anything, but instantly your feelings are hurt. That's what codependency is. And it can get really sick. I know, I've been there, done that. And I've had lots of treatment for it and a lot of help. And that's why I've made this my life's work, treating all addictions with the primary focus on eating disorders and codependency, because codependency is really the root of addictions. Because codependency is when we put some person, place, thing, activity above who we are and above God. That's codependency. Our good feelings come within, and that is a gift from God. Okay, so it's making children their best friends. If you don't have a healthy relationship with your spouse, a lot of times people will have their son as their little man, and even have them taken, particularly if there is some alcoholism in the family. If they have a young teen, they will make and they'll even voice it, well, now you're the man of the house now. Dad's in treatment. You got to be the man of the house. That is having that codependency with the child. A child never needs to feel like they are head of the house, because their brains are not developed enough to do that. Now, I will tell you, children need, part of codependency too for parents is not giving children enough responsibility or giving them too much. Children need to know that they live in a home that is theirs. They belong in that home, and you're doing them a disservice. And it is codependency to not teach children from an early age everything they need to know to go out there in the real world and live. And it starts at an early age. For instance, if a child can put on their shoes at age 2, let them. If they put them on the wrong feet, let them. They get up and walk and they'll be uncomfortable. They'll sit down and they'll switch those shoes. That's the learning experience. That's what happens when you let children take some responsibility. Now, a lot of times children won't do it unless parents guide them to that. And so it's important, whether a child is small or in their teens, to be a part of helping run the household. Whether it's teaching them to do laundry. I wouldn't teach my children anything because I felt like if they knew how to do everything, I wouldn't be needed. And I did everything for my kids, my husband. I would even lay out his clothes of a morning before he went to work. I told you I was a very sick codependent, but that's how I got my good feelings about myself. I was an overdoer. I was a human doer instead of a human being. And, I belonged to an organization to where people were helping me, and I had what is called a sponsor, and she kept trying to help me too, because my kids were getting up age that they needed to start helping around the house. She said, you need to teach your children how to take care of themselves, and I wouldn't do it. So one Monday morning, we'd had a bad weekend. Their father had been drinking and he had been gone and blah, blah, blah. And I got up the next morning, got those kids off to school, and I was doing laundry. So I called this sweet, nice woman that was always so nice to me, and I was just crying, and she asked me if I had done these specific assignments, writing assignments. No, I didn't have time. He was doing this. And she said, well, I want you to come meet me at 11 o'clock. Told me where. It was like at a support meeting. You be there at 11 o'clock. And if you're not, and I said, oh, I can't. I've got all this laundry to do. She said, you be there at 11 o'clock or you don't ever call my phone again. And that woman was my lifeline to some help. And I'll tell you, and then in a minute, she said, she kept hearing a noise. She said, what is that? Well, I was washing and drying clothes, and I had tennis shoes in the dryer, and they were going ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba. And I couldn't even hear her. She couldn't hear me, but I had to get all that laundry done. She said, once again, okay, meet me at 11 o'clock and don't be late. So I got there, and she said, I want you to go inside and you sit down and you listen. If they call on you to talk, you say, I pass, because you don't have anything to share. You don't know anything about codependency other than you are one. You go in there and sit down and listen. Okay, now this is that sweet woman that had been very nice to me for a long time. So I did that, and then afterwards she said, get in your car and follow me. And I said, okay, and so I did, and we came over to the south side. I live in Abilene, Texas, and they had this little kind of it was an early day Walmart. It was called Gibson's. It was way before Walmart. It's the only thing that we had close to it. It had, a few clothes, a few groceries, laundry supplies. That is called Gibson's Family Store. And she said, get out and follow me. And we went into the laundry section, and she said, I want you to buy each of your children a box of soap and 7 baskets. And I said, why? And she said, because we're going to teach your kids how to wash. I broke down and started crying, because I thought, if they learn how to do everything for themselves, how would I fit in? Would they need me? So she came out the next Sunday. We taught our kids how to wash. Now, the little kids took to it. The youngest was about 6 or 7. She took to it. She loved it. The teenagers had a little problem. They got a little angry. And so next couple of Sundays, I was in all the kids were home, and I was in the laundry room doing my husband and my laundry. My husband said, I kind of looked out of the corner of my eye, and all the kids were grouped up around him. And they were talking, and they said, well, she's changing so much, I don't even know what to call her anymore. And my bonus son, he was a teenager, about ready to leave home, and he said, well, what I do is I just call her she. And one of the other bonus children, who was a teenager, she said, well, I just call her it. And my husband, who was brilliant, practicing alcoholic, he said, well, let's put it together and just call her shit. So that's what they didn't call me that, but I heard them, so I'm just telling you this. I'm not just telling you something I've read out of a book. I've practiced codependency to the nth degree. When that bonus son went off to the Marine Corps, In fact, I was very close to him, still am. But when he went off to the Marine Corps, when he did his basic training, he had one call that he could make it at home. And he called me and he said, Tenny, I want to thank you. And I said, well, what for? And he said, I was the only man in our barracks that knew how to make a bed that a nickel could pop off of, and that knew how to clean a latrine. Most of them had to do it over and over and over, and how to make up the bed over and over. And he said, I want to thank you. I had to do it one time each. And so that is, when we're not teaching our children to do those things, we're really begrudging them that opportunity. They don't have to clean the house and do everything, but I think it's parents' responsibility to teach them at every age to take care of themselves. So I got kind of off here, but anyway, and children are very different, and this doesn't apply to every child. You know, for instance, my two oldest granddaughters, and there's 6 years difference in them, and they are very different in what their needs are. And the oldest one, you know, I would take them shopping, and when I take them shopping, Natalie was always a watch me Minnie, and she wanted me in the dressing room watching everything she tried on. She wanted my undivided attention. Her younger sister, Caitlin, did not. And what she would do, she'd get me a chair to sit outside, way away from the dressing room, and she would say, Minnie, if I like anything, I'll come out and show you. If she didn't, I never got to see what she tried on. So I'm just using that example, as children are different. So don't judge one child against the other. You have to get to know your children. So making children more than they are, you know, don't make them your little princess or your little man. You know, treat children as children, not your mate. Sometimes if there's problems in the coupleship, what will happen is the parents will make their children their surrogate spouse. And when you start doing that, you're into some sickness. And so a surrogate spouse you do not need to make your children. You do not need to be best friends with your children. You can be friendly with your children, of course, but they don't need to be your best friends. So, all righty, keeping secrets and encouraging children to keep secrets. Like I would tell my kids, don't you dare go to school and tell the school anything that went on in this house. Don't tell them about your dad getting drunk and about your mom screaming, because we look good on the outside. Our kids were very popular and, you know, high achievers, and the house looked good inside and out. But when we walked into that house, there was a crazy woman that lived there, and it was me, you know, and that was during the time I was eating myself to death. I can talk about my husband's alcoholism. For every drink that he drank, I ate. And I ate myself up to 287 pounds, and I was one angry, raging woman. And my children got the blunt of that. So, secrets kept. That's codependency. And then splitting parents allowing children to split them. For instance, if, you know, the mother tells them no and they go to dad and, you know, try to talk them into it, the parents need to check with each other. Otherwise, you're teaching your child to be a codependent and a manipulator at a young age, you know, and they'll brag to their parents, well, mom will say no, but dad will always say yes, or vice versa. And those parents need to have a united front. I would say you're going to slip sometimes. You know, kids can be, they can be diplomats. They can talk you into doing things that you don't want to do. But check it out with your spouse and stay on the same page. Don't let your children split you, because what you're doing is you're raising them up to get their own way and to demand their own way, and it can put them into their own codependency as they grow up. So I'm going to give you a little hint about how to raise children. I learned this after mine, were raised. As I got into recovery, my kids were still all in the house, and so we all kind of learned together. And my kids will tell me today, they brag on their childhood, and they remember the good things. And we've worked through the bad things, but we all have to have help when we live in dysfunctional homes. So there's been a lot of forgiveness around our house and a lot of love today. But I want to talk about how you raise children. I live in West Texas. Now, my dad was a cowboy, and I've lived around ranching, and I've never lived on a ranch, but nevertheless, I know a little bit about ranchers and how to raise calves. When calves, they're all born in the spring usually, and then the rancher will have a whole bunch of calves at the same time. And what they do, they take them off of their mother and they put them in a fenced acreage. And in that acreage, there is a tall fence around them. But inside that boundary or that fence is everything those little calves need to sustain themselves and to be healthy. There'll be green grass. They may feed them a little if the grass gets, here in West Texas, if it gets brown, they might add some supplement food. There'll be maybe a block of salt. There'll be plenty of fresh water. And the rancher says, now you little calves can do anything you want to do inside this fence. They give them freedom to explore inside that fence. That's what we need to do to children. Give them a boundary. Let them know what the boundary is. Now inside that boundary, you do what you want to do within these boundaries. And as a child gets older, those boundaries get wider. So the rancher will come out, he's giving them the instructions, this is, you can do anything in here, stay inside the fence. They'll go out there the next morning, and those little calves will have their nose, some of them, not all of them, will have their nose up under that last rail of the fence, reaching their tongue out, trying to get the grass on the other side. And a lot of times their grass will be even better. That's what kids do. They push the boundary. Now, that rancher also says there's going to be consequences if you get out of this arena. And, whatever that consequence is, they'll probably tie them up for a day or put them in a smaller pen away from the friends for a day. That's called grounding. They'll kind of do that, put them in a smaller pen or whatever. And that's how boundaries work with children. If you give them a boundary and say, now inside this boundary, you get to make a decision what you want to do. If you get outside that boundary, there's consequences. Now, a codependent parent a lot of times will not keep their word to children and won't, enforce the consequences. And children want that. That is one of the best ways for children to feel loved, is for you to see their behavior, keep your word to them, and if there is a consequence, let the child pay the consequence. Otherwise, you're being codependent with your child, and you're teaching them that they can get away with anything, and you're going to always love your child. But when you teach them to do things like that, get away with things, other people out there will not like them in the workplace or in school or whatever. So it's about giving children some boundaries, but giving them freedom. For instance, if a 6-year-old little girl is taking ballet lessons and she just is so excited about her tutu, maybe she's already had her recital, and she wants to wear her tutu to school with a leg, with her, whatever they call those legging things. The mother would be wise to let her wear the tutu to school, because I'll tell you, peer pressure is the worst. She'll either be made fun of and never wear a tutu again, or she'll, she might start a fashion trend. I mean, maybe every little girl in school will want to start wearing a tutu, But give your children within some bounds, because what they wear is not a reflection on you. I'll give you an example. When my son, I had a son and 3 daughters, but when the son was in the 1st grade, I dressed all of my children alike, and they looked darling, and people just bragged on them until they finally, went Karen on me, and I have a daughter named Karen. But anyway, they got together and refused to wear clothes a lot, but they were still doing it at this time. And I sent my son off to school. It was picture day, and I sent him off cute as a button with a red Ralph Lauren shirt that I couldn't even afford to buy. I mean, it had a collar on it. He was looking sharp, cute as a tack. And he went to school, and his little sisters were dressed the same way, and I took them, with me, and they were all out in the hall, and people bragged on the little girls, and oh, I felt good. That's how I got my good feelings about myself. So 6 weeks or so later, we got the school pictures, and I looked at my son's school pictures, and that red shirt was not there. He was 6 years old. He had on an old orange and white t-shirt that was about a size 4. It came up to here, and the collar was all messed up, and he was grinning ear to ear. He had slipped that shirt to school, pulled off the red one that his mama wanted him to wear, and put on that orange one. And that he was saying, I am a person and I can make my own decisions. That's one of my favorite pictures of him, and we laugh about it every time we look at it. So children need some independence within some guidelines. Another incident, this woman had a little girl that wanted to wear, she couldn't decide. No, excuse me, it was a little boy. He couldn't decide if he wanted to wear tennis shoes to school or a cowboy boot. I think he was about in kindergarten. Tennis shoes, or he had some new cowboy boots, or the cowboy boots. So he wore one of each. His mother did try to talk him out of it, but he was dead set. One cowboy boot, one tennis shoe. And so it made him walk, like he was crippled. He had to come to hop. Also, that boot rubbed blisters on his heels. When he came back the next day, that afternoon after school, when his mother picked him up, he took that boot off and he said, I'll never do that again. Now, had she not had that experience, he would have probably wanted to wear one shoe of a kind for days. But that was a wise mother. The teacher called her, and that mother had enough self-esteem to say, that's what he chose to wear, and no, I will not bring him another shoe or boot. And that's healthy parenting. Let your children suffer the consequences of their action as long as they're not, something that they're going to be harmed. So give them some leeway in making their decisions. And if their decisions don't line up with yours, don't take it on. Don't take it up. One thing I want to say too is, when children have pain, and they will, maybe your child's the only one that wasn't invited to the birthday party, that hurts. That hurts. And it's really hard not to take on your child's feelings. And if you were a child and you wasn't invited to a birthday party, you can empathize with that child, because you know how it feels. And so share that with the child. I see your pain. I see your tears. I see your disappointment. And talk about the feelings. Don't try to divert them. Don't say, oh, well, let's just go get ice cream. And you may later go get ice cream, but acknowledge the child's feelings. That, it's embarrassing to not be invited. It's hurtful. And so have that empathy with the child that you will do. Now, if you sympathize with them and bless their heart, oh, bless your little heart, and, well, we'll just have our own birthday party here and go back, and overdo and not acknowledge the child's pain, and you sympathize with them. Sympathy can be found in the dictionary between shit and syphilis, and it'll do you about as much good. For a child or an addict, if you want to sympathize with an addict, you'll kill an addict, because they feel sorry for themselves enough. And little kids can get to feeling sorry for themselves enough. They don't need your sympathy. They need your empathy and your guidance and your love. And I will say, you're not going to do it perfect. And I want to say too, they are going to grow up. Thank God, children do grow up. I have wonderful adult grown children, and I enjoy my kids. They do not have to take care of me. I don't take care of them. I do not meddle in their business. I am not the least bit codependent on my children. Had I not gotten some help, I mean, I would probably be wearing them out, wanting them here all the time. They go their way, I go my way. Now, my son, my daughters, we get together. We all live within a mile of each other, the three daughters. My son lives in town. My son is pretty much a wheeler dealer and's gone a lot. But when I get to want to see him, I'll call him and I say, okay, Kelly, I need to see you. Do you want to come to see me? Or do you want to come to see me? And he'll laugh and he'll say, well, when are you going to cook for me? And I'll laugh and I'll cook him a meal. I have no expectations about my adult children to be in here for me. Consequently, they want to be with me a lot. We have a lot of fun, but we've each one worked through the wreckage of the past. And that's why we can be with each other today and be in healthy adult relationships and not a child to a parent. Now, sometimes in this pandemic, and they lost their father 6 years ago, they want me to kind of be the child. They're trying to make me mind, and I don't mind very easy. They keep me on a very short leash. I'm joking, but they do take very good care of me. I don't need a lot of care, but I'll tell you, my children are very devoted to me, and I'm very self-sufficient. I can take care of myself, and but every once in a while, we all need a little help. I've got bad knees and they kind of help me up, but once I get up, I can run a marathon practically, So what I'm just saying is they will grow up. By age 14, you've got 14 years. About age 14, children have learned about as much as they're going to learn for parents. You don't kick them out of the house. You let them live there. They usually leave about 18, 19, go off to college, or, they begin to leave home. From 14 to 18, they begin to practice what you have taught them. And if you haven't really taught them some skills on how to live life in those first 14 years, that's on you, not on your children. So do your children a favor and learn the word no. No is a complete sentence. And when you're around healthy people, you're going to hear no 50% of the time. So if you hear no 50% of the time, you're going to hear yes 50% of the time. And so that goes for your children. It's okay to tell them no. No is a complete sentence without any explanation, and they will work you to death and try to wear you down and not take no. And you're not giving them a gift if you let them have their way about everything. That's one of the most dangerous things about parenting, is letting kids have their way. They need good guidance. They need guidance on, growing up. It is about emotional health, physical health, and spiritual growth. Teach your children about God and about God's love for them. Whatever your religion is, or if you're not religious, let them choose. You do not force your religion on your children. Lead by example. And the whole thing of everything that I'm saying is to learn to let our children go at different stages of their life. And love is the most powerful force on the face of the earth. Love is the only thing that can turn an enemy into a friend. Hope you've gotten something out of this. If you have any questions or comments, you can call Shades of Hope or email our executive director, Cam, C-A-M, at shadesofhope.com, all lowercase letters.com. I'm also I am doing phone sessions with people. And if you have any desire to do a phone session with me, call Cam. She'll set it up. And if you are, I've just scratched the surface about codependency. And if you pick up on anything, any habits that you might have, if you want more help, one of the things, consider coming and doing an intensive with me. I do a 4-day intensive once a month, and it is on codependency. And it's called Breaking Free from Codependency. And we educate people on all addictions, but we do the core pain work, the baggage that is passed from one generation to the next. If you don't want to pass your family baggage on to your children, do this kind of work and pass it back. We're either going to pass it back through therapy or we're going to pass it forward to our children. So, thanks for listening, and I hope you've gotten something out of this, and have a great day. Thanks.